Hey guys, in this video, I decided to make a low poly remaster of an already low poly character model. Here, you can see the Battle Angel Alita game for the PS1. It is not a popular game, but I have always loved the look, feel, and aesthetics it offered. So I decided why not. I wanted to make something fun, so I made this video. I hope you find it cool just like I did since this game has a good place in my heart. This model took me hours and multiple days to finish, meaning that this is by far the most complex model I have made so far. So without further ado, let's get into the process of creation. Since I knew this model was going to take a while to finish, I just imported a pre-made head and face mesh to save at least an hour worth of modeling. Also, I slightly changed how I made this video's time-lapse. Anything that goes really fast means that that part is not as important as those that you can watch pretty easily. I did this so that I could slow down parts that really needed to be seen by you guys. I hope that it somehow helps a little bit. Here, you can see me doing the basic step of just blocking out all the body parts. Most of the mesh at this phase will be replaced later by better mesh models. Also, I gave the base meshes a bit more detail to help me guide the better mesh models that I would be making later in the process. Since my goal was to make the model look like a PS1 with better graphics, instead of try to restrict myself with the PS1 specs, I sort of based the model to have a look like a PS 1.5 game, which means somewhere near PS2 but not quite. You can see that I sort of made the shape of the rib cage. It is so that I would have a better modeling experience later when I am making the separated battle armor pieces. It is important to have a base mesh where you are comfortable to work on. Here, I started to first make the shoulders and its joints since I know that it would be a difficult part to figure out later in the process. Then I continued by making the under chest piece that you can see in the references. Though I have multiple references to work from, it was still very difficult to figure out how I would wrap around the under chest piece. Due to its complex shape, it took me a while to understand it. Also, you can see here that since I gave a bit more detail to the base chest mesh, I was able to easily guide the surrounding meshes on it. This made the process of making complex meshes a lot easier. My main struggle here is making the curve look natural and not blocky. Though the two pieces look good on their own, for me to be able to connect them, I would have to use triangles instead of quads. So, that is what I did. For the back, I made another new base mesh to use as a guide for the final back piece. The original base mesh was not helpful. That is why I made a new one. The new mesh gave me the right amount of faces for the back to look great. So, using a new mesh, I followed the amount of faces whilst being able to shape it the way I want it to look. It turned out to be the right decision since I also used the same new back mesh as the front chest mesh with slight adjustment. You will see it later after this. Making the chest look good proved to be challenging. With the little faces I had to work with, I had to really just try and make it work. I think I was able to make it look decent enough, but I am still unsure if it really is good. Doing the little accessories for certain parts was fun. These were some of the easier things I had to model for this project. Here, you will see me merge the front and back pieces of the model's chest. After observing the meshes for a while, I decided to merge the two since I knew that if I do not, making outlines for this model would be very difficult. This one is the piece I had in mind when I first made the rib cage shape earlier in the blocking out phase. With the under chest piece and actual chest piece, I had to make sure that this pieces look good on its own and be able to complement the other mesh shapes. Trying to model the stomach made me recheck the proportion of the body parts, which was great since I did notice that the torso was too long. I later adjust this to the right proportions. Though I said that the base meshes were all going to be replaced later, I made exceptions for some body parts. For the pelvis, I shaped the original base mesh to look good enough for the final render. However, I did make new meshes to overlay for the butt part of the model. I was glad that I made this disc-shaped mesh separately since it helped me make the model's pelvis look a lot smoother without having the need to add too much polygons and faces. Making the butt part was a bit difficult. My thought process for making this part was similar to when I was making the back part of the chest piece. However, I think I just freestyled this part and hoped that it looked good. I just made sure that the individual pieces that I was making match those that are seen in the references. After making all the pieces and feeling satisfied with those meshes, I then looked for vertices that did not look good and tried to adjust or remove them entirely. The shoulder piece, I think, was one of the most important meshes for the model. This piece gives the model its shoulder width, which overall completes the cyborg battlesuit look. While I was making this piece, I also did a quick ray proportioning of the limbs since I made an adjustment earlier in the process. This piece was a little bit easier to make since it really is just a curved or bold-shaped mesh. Making the arm was one of the cooler meshes I made for this model. It had such detail that I was able to properly translate it into low poly meshes. Also, since the pieces is what gives the arm of the model thickness, I had fun adjusting, shaping, and making meshes for this body part. This part that I am making here is my favorite part from all the meshes I made for this model. I was able to make cool little pieces that was able to give the model much more detail. Making the forearm pieces was easy. However, the difficult part about it is making the straps at the underside of it. I tried to figure it out by making multiple meshes to see which one was better. At the end, I chose the one I made from a tube mesh base. It made the strap a lot easier to be made. Also, you can see here that I have put a sphere mesh at the model's armpits. It is so that the arm and the chest would look normal and connected to each other. I am planning to make a separate video on how I make my low poly hands, so while I have not made that, here is a time lapse of me making it. The Damascus blade was fun to model. It was simple and straight to the point. It didn't really need that much polygons, so I was pretty happy about that as well. If you have watched my scooter video, the process there for how I made the front wheel is the same process I did to make the wheels for this model. I was glad to have done that model since now I have the right knowledge to be able to make things similar to that. The helmet was pretty straightforward to make. Since I have been making this model for at least a couple of days now, I already knew what I was going to do for this helmet piece. At this point of the process, I have learned a couple of new tricks, which made modeling this piece a lot easier. While I was making this helmet piece, I kept zooming in and out to look how much progress I have made on this model. It is a pretty good looking one if I say so myself. Since only a portion of the hair was going to be seen, it was not necessary for me to make a new full hair mesh. I just made a simple mesh and made spikes at the end of it, which is similar to my previous model that I have made. Now, we have finished modeling. Here, I am just posing the model for me to check if the proportion in the meshes looks good in multiple angles by making a turnaround GIF. After about 10 hours of modeling, we can now do the textures. I first started with working on the face of the model. Technically, what I would have done was to first create and fill all the base colors per mesh. This would help me identify which meshes should be detailed or not. But since I wanted to take my time with the face texture and know that the whole suit would not be as detailed compared to it, I decided to just put a bit more effort with the face, since that is the one that you would be looking at for the majority of the time. You can see that my reference or making the face is based from the in-game screenshot and of the live-action Alita movie. I wanted the model to have the look of both, so I tried to make it look similar to both of it. So I based the eyes on the live-action Alita, while the mouth to the game counterpart of Alita. If you would notice, I have removed the right arm and the left arm of the model when making the textures for the model. I did this because I knew that those models were just going to be duplicated and flipped, so having the opposite arm and leg would just make its textures redundant. You may consider making outlines part of the modeling phase, but since I use an automated approach, I do not consider it. Here, you would see me trying out different levels of line weights. Since the model is relatively small, I have to find the right level of thickness for the model. It may look complicated, however, I can assure to all of you that it is easy. That is why in the next short tutorial to be uploaded, I will be tackling how I make outlines in Blockbench. Since outlines help make certain meshes pop out, I had to make some adjustments to certain meshes in order to make the outlines much more visible. You can decide whether or not to do this step, but for me, I recommend to not be afraid of moving meshes in you finish models. Sometimes, it can lead to unexpected gifts. Here, since the outline did not create a line for a certain part, I just extruded some edge formed the outline mesh and shaped it to my desired line. Now, here's where I put a big effort on making the face look good. The first face texturing was a sketch and a test to see where the facial features should be. Now that I know where those are, I just have to make them look pretty. Alita's big eyes were very difficult to get and translate to pixel textures. I had to make a way to make the eyes look round without it looking like a half-circle iris. Also, I had to adjust the irises later since the two were slightly drifted away from each other. For the lips, I had to give it a skin tone outline since that would help make it blend into the texture itself. Plus, it makes the lips look smooth. When I am coloring materials that are not skin, I usually limit myself to 3 colors: the base, the highlight, and the base color. This just makes the texturing easier since I would not need to worry about multiple color variations. Making Alita's nameplate was a bit difficult since I had to fit a relatively long name into a very small pixelated space. I tried to make it work with the Alita name, but in the end, I opted to use the name Gali since that is technically her original name in Japanese when the manga first debuted. Similar with the back of the helmet, I wanted to emphasize the chest a bit more using outlines, so I extruded some and shaped it accordingly. Doing the big number 99 on her back was actually fun. Since it is in a very simple shape, I was able to put all the necessary details to make the number pop as an attraction. The Damascus blades was fun to texture, since it had to have this cool wave pattern. I used an airbrush to create that effect. It did a pretty decent job. Here, I wanted to add a small bolt that I could place on certain pieces to make it look more like a machine. So I made one, and put it to where it could make sense. Since I just duplicated the arm, the number plate got mirrored. To fix this, I just had to make a new texture for it and retexture it. Also, since the video is about to be finished, I want to say thank you for 1000 subscribers. I never thought that this channel would be able to reach this big of an audience, and for that, I thank you all for your support and love. I will be continuing to make cool models and 3D low poly scenes for you guys. Alright, the video is about to end. Here is the full and complete model. See you in the next video.